welcome back. And joining us today is Willis Morgan. Thank you for being on the show.
Well, thank you, Al, for having me.
So, how's everything been going for you in the last little bit since we talked?
Oh, since the last time we talked, I did at least half a dozen more radio shows, so everything's going pretty good.
Yeah. How's the response been for you?
Well, I'm getting a lot of response. Yeah, I've even had other detectives call into some of the radio shows and make comments about how intriguing this was.
Yeah.
The case, how believable my story was.
Yeah, it's all been pretty positive then overall. So, for the listeners now that haven't heard or what we're talking about, let's start with the scenario in your book. So let's start with what happened to you first.
Okay. I was at the Hollywood Mall, and I had an encounter. I was in Radio Shack. I went there to have lunch, and I ended up in Radio Shack first. And while I was in Radio Shack, this young, disheveled man came up to me, and he was trying to start a conversation. And it was very bizarre because of the look of this guy. He had this dead-dull look in his eyes, and he was standing there with a smile, trying to start a conversation. He just kept smiling at me. And the smile didn't match that dead, dull look in his eyes. And it became so bizarre that when he finally stomped out of Radio Shack, I knew somebody was going to be in trouble. So I was watching him. I watched him walk into Sears and then into the toy department. And this was just minutes before Adam was abducted. My thinking at the time was he didn't come back out of the toy department. I stood there for a minute, and I'm thinking he's probably playing the video games. So I just left and went home. It was that very same evening I heard about this abduction on the local news in Miami here, and immediately my first thought was that guy. That guy did it. He actually did it. I knew he was up to no good, and I knew something was going to happen, but never did I think a 6-year-old kid was going to be in trouble.
Wow. So now, when you're saying that you were in the Radio Shack, so he came up to you, what was sort of... what was he saying to you, or what made you feel like he was a little bit off? Like, what was strange?
Well, what made me feel he was off is, like I said, his demeanor and his look, his disheveled look about him, and his appearance. Not so much what he said, but, just the fact that he came up to me, wanted to start a conversation, made me believe he was some nut job that was lonely, wanted somebody to talk to. And that's about all I was thinking, except that look in his eyes was just so bizarre. He looked very disturbed and very lonely, like I said. But I didn't say much to him. I didn't say anything to him, actually. Yeah. It was him doing most of the talking. He was saying things like, hi there, nice day, isn't it? And kept repeating that pretty much because I wouldn't answer. And then he just stood there staring me up and down like, I don't know what,
Yeah.
I don't know what he was thinking at that point, but he wouldn't leave. He just kept looking at me with a smile.
Wow. So it's
he stomped out.
Yeah, it's weird. Eh? So you get home, and so you did nothing actually at the time. So you saw him. He went into the toy department. Then you just left them all.
Right. I didn't do anything because I didn't know anything happened until that evening.
Right, of course. So when you see it on the news, you right away kind of had this suspicion this was the guy.
Oh, it was more than a suspicion. I knew it was. It had to be. Nobody could be that bizarre and not be the guy. It was that bizarre. I'm not getting into the details. I don't want to,
Yeah.
Spend the whole show talking about this bizarre encounter, but it was very bizarre. There's no question if you have an encounter like that, just moments. This was around mid-afternoon, around 12 o'clock in the afternoon that he walked into the toy department. Adam was abducted between 12:15 and 12:20. So, the timing of it, everything, the exact location, how could it not be this guy?
Yeah. So what did you do then? When you're watching the news, you knew right away. So did you call the cops then?
Oh, I did. I went to the police. But the problem was, they wanted a receipt to prove that I was there. I didn't have a receipt, and they wanted a tag number. And I tried to explain to them this was inside the mall. This occurred in Sears and Radio Shack. I never had this encounter outside of the mall. I don't know what the vehicle was. So they just dismissed me, and they took my phone number, and they said, if we need you, we'll call you. They never ever called me. And a week or 10 days later, composites started showing up in the newspaper, and they were the spitting image of this guy that I had this encounter with. So my thinking was, well, at least they have their composites. There's nothing more I can do, so I let it go.
So what was the next thing that happened to you that brought you back to this situation?
Well, it was a gradual thing. Several years later, this other guy, I went to work, actually, and press room secretary, Monica, came up to me with a newspaper, and she said, Willis, is this the guy? And she pointed at a photo in the newspaper, and I looked at it, and I said, no. And she said, are you sure? Because he said he did it. So I looked at the photo again, and I told her, no, this is not him. And later I read the photo, and sure enough, this guy is confessing. And the police, his name was Otis Elwood Toole. And the police grilled him for like 4 months as a suspect, but then dismissed him completely. Wow. And they kept saying it was the friend of John Walsh. They always view it in on the family. You know, that's standard procedure.
Right.
But I knew it couldn't have been anybody, friend of John, his house guest, James Campbell, because this guy approached me first, and the stories I was reading in the paper was that Adam may have been targeted, and he wasn't targeted. This guy was meandering through the mall. Had he met somebody else before he got to the toy department, you know, he would have approached them the same way he approached me. So I just knew it was the guy that I encountered, and Adam wasn't targeted. And had they charged that James Campbell, I would have went to his aid the same way I would have went to Otis Toole's aid had they charged him, but they never charged anybody. So I never contacted the police again until 1991, which is almost to the day, 10 years later, when I was at work and I was going through the paper, and I stopped. I froze. I'm looking at this mugshot in the paper, and it's the guy that I had that encounter with. There he is in a newspaper. There was some guy up in Milwaukee, and the article saying about all these horrible things he did in his apartment. I'm reading this. I'm saying, I knew this was the guy. I didn't even know he was in South Florida. I'm just looking at the mugshot, and I knew right away. And I called the library up, the Mommy's Old Library, where I work. We had our own library, and I asked them for the mugshot that ran back in 1981. And I'm sorry, the composite that was in the paper of the Adam Walsh suspect from 1981, and they sent it to me in my in-house mailbox. I was a supervisor in the press room. So I took that mugshot along with the composite from the library, and I went back to the Hollywood Police Department. I said, hey, look, this is a spitting image of this guy in the newspaper. This is the guy I had an encounter with. And I tried to explain to them. And the lead detective, his name is Jack Hoffman, he was still on the case, and his jaw dropped. And I could tell the way he looked. I mean, his face went flush. And I'm thinking, he knows something, but he's not telling me. And I let it go because I'm thinking, well, they never tell people, and especially other witnesses, you know, about what, you know, the facts about their case.
Right.
So I'm thinking, I just let it go. And I didn't realize until they closed the case in 2008, when I got a hold of the case files, and I'm looking through them, and I see that composite, the same one that I brought to them. And I realized it wasn't from the Hollywood Mall. It was from another mall, another Sears, on another Monday, in the toy department, at the same time of day. Everything was the exact scenario. This woman, Ginger Keaton, took her son to the Sears. And he stayed in the toy department. She was shopping just hours away, exact same thing Reve did. And Dahmer came in there. I say Dahmer because he said Dahmer. He swears it's Dahmer, too. And the composites are the spitting image of Jeffrey Dahmer, as well as the composites from the Hollywood Mall. And the police back in 1981 dismissed that incident because, quote unquote, from the Sun-Tat, and I have the article at my free, the entire article is on my free website at justiceforadam.com, where it can be read. And in my book, I reference the website and the case files, and I have excerpts from that article where Jack Hoffman says, quote unquote, that he dismissed the Twin City Mall as relevant to the Hollywood incident because the composite didn't match James Campbell. That was John's house kids. Every time these cops get zeroed in on a suspect, they put blinders on. And in the meantime, numerous witnesses and police chiefs from other police departments, like in South Beach, Deerfield Beach, Plantation, were all calling them with very similar incidents of attempted abductions of kids. 6-foot white male with a blue van. They even sent one of their police officers to bring the hard copy of the report, the police report, to the Hollywood Police Department. They didn't even call most of the witnesses. They just completely dismissed it because they were so busy grilling James Campbell as their chief suspect at the time.
So, what were the witnesses that you found when you looked back at it?
Okay, well, the first witness I found, I joined some of these search engines like Intellius, PeopleSearch.com, and there's a whole bunch of them that you can join. And there's many of them. Anyways, those are two of the ones that I joined. But I found my best searches came from free public records, like property owners. If you go to any county, most counties in the entire United States, if you go to their government websites, you know, like in Broward, I went to the Broward County Tax Appraiser's office, and I started typing in witnesses, and boom, they would come right up like that, because they were property owners. And it would give me an address of where their property is. It would tell you all the information about their property, and it wouldn't give a phone number. So I would go knock on their doors. And Philip Lure was one of the first ones that I contacted. But previously I had known another witness, Bill Bowen, because somebody gave me his address because in 1991 his name became known because he went to the police department the same time I did when he also saw Dahmer's mugshot in the paper. And from in Alabama, he was living in Birmingham now, and he also came all the way back to Hollywood with a newspaper and showed them and told them the exact same thing I did, and they completely dismissed him as well. And now I'm contacting other witnesses, and Philip Lure told me his story, and he went there to pay a bill. And he was very upset because there was this blue van parked by the West Side Garden entrance and blocking all the traffic. And because of that, he lost his parking space. And then he was even more angry because when he finally got another parking space, he had to walk around the blue van that was right in front of the door to go into Sears. And when he went in, he saw this guy, a young man, carrying this young boy, 6-year-old boy, out of the store, and boy was screaming, protesting, "You're not my daddy, you're not my daddy." And Philip Lure said he turned around backwards watching this. And he was thinking he should do something, but then he's thinking, well, maybe that's a stepfather. You know, and it was just a rambunctious kid that didn't want to leave the toy area. So he went to pay his bill, and while he was in line, he started having second thoughts. He ran back outside. The blue van, the guy, and the kid were all gone. That's his statement. They completely dismissed Phil as a reliable witness, and they said because he was very sarcastic is the word they used. But he wasn't sarcastic. What happened was he went to the Hollywood Police Department, and they completely dismissed him. So that was Detective Mark Smith that he talked to, dismissed him. So he went over Smith's head to talk to his chief, and his chief dismissed him. So he worked his way over to the Broward County State Attorney's office, and they dismissed him before they even gave him an interview. If you listen to his interview, in my book, I have the entire interview, as well in the case files. I reference it where you can read it as well. That he describes Adam to a T. He talks about everything, exactly what happened, you know, and the timing, it was all, you could see he was there. There was no question that he was there, and yet they completely dismiss him. Anyway, I decided to contact other witnesses, another property owner that I found. Her name is Jenny Warren. She has since passed away because even back in 2008, she was 84 years old. And I knocked on her door. And as an elderly woman, I was a little nervous about knocking on the door. I didn't know what kind of reaction I was going to get. But then I hear this very quiet voice answer. She goes, "Hello?" from the inside of the door. And I explained who I was. I said, "My name's Willis Morgan. I would like to talk to you about something that happened back in 1981. As soon as I said that, she says, "You mean the Adam Walsh case?" So I said, "Yes." She opens the door, and what she did next caught me completely off guard. I wasn't expecting it. She started bawling and bawling. She couldn't get her composure. She was bawling so hard. I mean, her tears were running down her cheeks. And I just stood there, and she tried to compose herself, and then she would bawl again, and finally she composed herself enough to say, "I'm sorry, I don't mean to bawl, but it wasn't him. It was the other guy. They just closed the case. And it wasn't him, it was the other guy." I knew who she was talking about. So she invited me in. We sat at the dining room table, and she told me her story, how she went there with her 2 grandkids and saw Jeffrey Dahmer in the toy department talking to kids. And she thought it was, very odd. He looked so out of place. And then there's Janice Santomassino. Now, Janice called America's Most Wanted to tell John Walsh, what happened. But she talked to an operator there. And the reason she called is because John did a show about his son. Mm-hmm. It was the last episode of America's Most Wanted. I think it was like after 15 years when they were ready to cancel the show.
Right.
So he did the entire 1-hour show. And the reason it took him 15 years to do the show is because the Hollywood Police Department kept telling him, "Please don't air anything about your son, Adam, because it'll interfere with the investigation. We'll never catch anybody." So John adhered to that. For 15 years, he never did anything. Finally, when the show was ready to be canceled, and by the way, they didn't cancel it. It went another 10 years. I think it ran for a total of 25 years or something. But at that time, they were ready to cancel it. He did the whole hour. And the whole hour of the show was about how Otis Toole abducted Adam. And the reason I believe the narrative was Otis Toole is because one of these detectives, his name is Detective Joe Matthews, he's the detective. I know I'm going all over the place a little bit. I'm digressing. But I want to say that Detective Matthews, when he heard about John Walsh's show, he called John to befriend him, and John ended up hiring him on the show as the lead investigator on America's Most Wanted. A lot of people don't realize he had one of these bumbling, stumbling detectives as his lead investigator. He was feeding John misinformation about the case for years, about his own son's abduction. John Walsh wrote his book, Tears of Rage, not only because he was upset about what happened to his son, but because of the Hollywood Police Department and the way they handled the case. That's his quote in his book, calling them the biggest bunch of bumbling, stumbling idiots since the Keystone Cops. And now he has one of them right in his midst. So this detective wrote a 400-page manuscript pinning the abduction on Otis Toole after all the other detectives had dismissed Otis Toole. He was the only one left, the last man standing, and he pinned this with this manuscript and bamboozled the Hollywood Police Department into closing the case, and also convinced John Walsh that it was Otis Toole. And so they closed the case. I was there at that closing. I know we're supposed to be talking about the witnesses, but I just have to say, I was there at the closing. And it was sad that a police department would lower themselves to doing something like this. So I filed a lawsuit against them because I wanted to see that closing report that Matthews made up. Now all of a sudden they wouldn't show it to me. The case is closed. They have to show it to me by Florida law, and it has to be part of the record. But in that closing on December 16, 2008, they praised Matthews. They praised his report, that they used it to close the case. It was based on that report. It's recorded. It's you can get it on YouTube. That closing report where the camera pans over to Joe Matthews when they're praising him. John Walsh is praising him as well for his investigation. But now that I asked for the report, all of a sudden, they don't have it. They want to show it to me. And so when I filed a lawsuit, They changed the narrative. They said they didn't really use the report. They did their own investigation before they received that report, which is, by the way, irrelevant according to Florida Sunshine Law. You receive it, it's part of the case file. It doesn't matter what your opinion is. Their opinion's been wrong 1,000 times. They can go for 1,001. That doesn't make that report any less relevant. So they claim that they did their own investigation to close the case. So I asked for their investigative report. There is none. I asked for their closing report. There is none. There are no reports. The Hollywood Police Department doesn't have a report. All we know is the case is closed. Back to the witnesses?
Yeah.
Okay. We were up to Janice Santomassino.
Yes.
She also went to the mall that day on July 27th, 1981. And as she was driving up to the west side looking for a parking space, she almost ran into this blue van that was parked illegally by the curb. She almost ran into the back of it, not expecting it to be there when she came around the corner. And she was going to report it to security. But when she finally went inside the mall, she just let it go, and her daughter wanted to look at some Barbie dolls or something in the toy department. So they stopped in the toy department, and she saw this disheveled man standing there was holding something, pretending like he was looking at it. And she got so nervous with this guy that she just left. Her daughter was actually playing with Adam for a short time. But she left. And she swears it was Jeffrey Dahmer. She got a good look because they locked eyes. And so she got a profile look at him, everything, and she swears it was Jeffrey Dahmer. She calls the police, and she calls America's Most Wanted. America's Most Wanted forwarded her call to the Hollywood Police Department. They have never called her. And they've never never interviewed Philip Law. Like I said, they dismissed him. They refused to interview him. The state attorney finally interviewed and dismissed him. Okay? Now, Vernon Jones is another witness. He was 9 years old, a 9-year-old black boy that was playing the video games with Adam for a short time. He was playing an Atari baseball game. Adam was standing to his right, and there was this disheveled man standing to his left. Okay, Vernon went there with his grandfather. His grandfather was in the lawn business. And he went to the tool department to buy some tools, craftsman tools. And Vernon stayed in the toy department because at 9 years old, he wasn't so much interested in tools. So he stayed in the toy department, which is right next to the tool department. So it wasn't like his grandfather left him very far. And while he's playing this video game with Adam, this disheveled man keeps beckoning him with hisses, like, psst, psst, hey you, come here, like that. Vernon looks up at this guy, thinking to himself, man, I'm not going with you. And then he hears this big crack. And he looks back, and it's Adam. He just got a grand slam home run while Vernon was distracted. And he won. And he was standing there with this big smile on his face. Vernon said he was so upset that he just went around the other side of the aisle and started playing Donkey Kong by himself and left Adam there. And a few minutes later, he saw this guy walking past with Adam. But at 9 years old, didn't think much of it until that evening when his grandmother called him into the living room and said, Vern, get in here. And he goes into the living room. She goes, you in the toy department? Did you see this young man? And he goes, Grandpa, that's the boy I was playing the video game with. So his grandfather takes him to the Hollywood Police Station the very next morning. He never makes it inside. See, these are some of the things the Hollywood Police Department do not want anyone to know. They fought tooth and nail not to have their case files released. And I set up this website so that now everyone can go and view the case files. Throughout my book, Frustrated Witness, I reference the case files, every bit of information, where I get it from. I tell you what file it's in, what page it's on. You can go and check for yourself. And you can just go to the files yourself. It's free. JusticeForAdam.com. So, anyway, he goes up to this Vern's grandfather goes up to this police officer that was at the entrance of the police station and to inquire about the case. And this police officer turns to the grandfather and he spits a wad of tobacco on the grandfather's shoe and says to him, "Boy, I ain't got time for this." Vern says at 9 years old, he couldn't understand why this much younger police officer was calling his grandfather boy, because it was the first time he had an experience with racism. And he remembers the tobacco splattering all over his grandfather's shoe to this day. His grandfather took Vern by the hand and they left. They would not hear from Vern. And the only reason I got Vern's name is because, again, years later, after Vern grew up, he wrote to America's Most Wanted, the most heartfelt letter you could imagine. I mean, the letter just breaks you up. He apologizes, explains that he was only 9 years old, he didn't know what was going on, and he didn't understand at 9. And John, or when I say John, again, I don't know if John in particular, but America's Most Wanted received that, and they sent it to the Hollywood Police Department and asked them to call this man, Vern. They never called him. To this day, Vern says that he does seminars all over the country with police departments. But yet, this police department has never interviewed him. And the reason Vern travels and does seminars because he does child protection work, and he has his own gym. He's a black belt in karate, all because of this incident. Because after that incident, his parents and grandparents decided to get him into a karate school so he could better protect himself, and that's what he ended up doing for a career. Is as a child advocacy, doing child advocacy work all over the United States. So again, they have never interviewed Vern. I mean, many witnesses that they've never interviewed, they refuse to interview. And even Jack Hoffman, every time I kept telling him when I went back to him in 1991 about Dahmer, he steadfastly refused to even consider Dahmer as a suspect. And I know it has to be because I went to him with that wrong composite, and he knew right then that he messed up more miserably than anybody knows by dismissing all these attempted abductions as being relevant to the Adam Walsh case because he was so zeroed in on James Campbell.
And
I believe the Hollywood Police Department admit that case files have been lost. Now, lost to me is just another word for expunged. And the person that had the most to lose, I'm not going to say who got rid of the evidence from the records department, the evidence department room, but I will say Jack Hoffman had the most to lose, so I'll just leave people to make their own decision on who they think, because I believe that loss is just another word for expunged. I believe evidence was deliberately disappeared. One thing for sure is evidence does not grow legs and walk off.
And so now you're associating the blue van with Dahmer. How do you do that?
Oh, because there's... Okay, can I give you one more witness first before we go to that question? Just remember that question. That's a very good question.
Yeah.
I want to tell you about Mia Taylor. Mia Taylor was 10 years old. Her brother, Joel, was 9 years old. They lived out in the East Everglades. Back then in 1981, I mean, that was country. Now there's a lot of developments going up in that area, but back then there was nothing but woods, swamps, and country. And every once in a while, her father would bring the family into Hollywood, into the city, so he can go to the Hollywood dog track and gamble for a little bit. And he would bring the family and drop them off at Sears and leave them there and pick them up a couple hours later. He would drop them off at 10 o'clock in the morning when they opened. And Mia was in the Sears with her mother, her two older brothers, and her younger brother, Joel. While her mother and two older brothers were shopping, Mia and Joel wandered over to the toy department. While they were in the toy department on On Sunday, the day before of Adam's abduction, this is Sunday, July 26th, 1981, this disheveled man came into the toy department and tried to abduct her brother. But fortunately, the security guard and her mother happened to show up. The security guard showed up because there were complaints about the noise in the toy department, too many kids making noise, so she showed up. This is the same security guard that showed up on the 27th, and they tried to they used her as their scapegoat, saying that she put Adam out of the store, which never happened. Again, I'm digressing, I know. But anyways, back to the 26th. Now, when Dahmer, whom she now says is Dahmer, approached her brother, they ran to their mother. And then the security guard also showed up, and Dahmer just fled. And on the way out of the West Garden Center exit, she saw that same disheveled man standing there next to a blue van. So she's not only another blue van witness, she's also a witness in the toy department. Now, Ottis Toole has been steadfast about one thing. He never went inside Sears. He abducted Adam from the parking lot. So that was the scenario that they went with. The security guard on the 27th kicked Adam out, and Ottis Toole snatched him in the parking lot. But that's not what happened, because too many witnesses, like Bill Bowen, saw Adam being tossed into the blue van, carried, and tossed like a sack of potatoes, that's his quote, into the blue van. Philip Law saw Adam being carried across the threshold of the Garden Center exit, and other witnesses saw him, like Vernon Jones and Jenny Warren, and there's many others too that saw him in the toy department with Adam. So, that dismisses all their scenarios with the security guard. But what I want to say is that had Dahmer been successful on the 26th with her brother Joel, Adam would never have been abducted. Because after Adam was abducted on the 27th, that toy department was closed down. There was crime scene tape, there was helicopters, there were dozens of police officers looking for Adam. I mean, he would have never been able to go back 2 days in a row. So Adam would never have been abducted had he been successful with her brother Joel. Now, what was your question?
Let's associate what we're coming together with the witnesses. So,
Dahmer in the blue van.
The first thing is the blue van. Yeah. So how do you tie that to him?
Okay. There's three locations in the abduction of Adam. One is at the Hollywood Mall where he was abducted from. Then we have two others. I'll get into both of those. The other one is where they found the severed head on the turnpike. There's four witnesses that saw a white male 6 feet tall with a blue van at that site. Okay? Now, there's also the site where Adam was murdered. The meter room behind the store where Jeffrey Dahmer worked in Sunny Isles. So that's the third location. All three of those locations are associated with a blue van. And two of those locations are associated with Jeffrey Dahmer. And that is the Hollywood Mall, where witnesses say it was Jeffrey Dahmer, and the place where Dahmer works, Sunshine Subs, and that's where the meter room was at. So Dahmer and the blue van are associated with both of those two sites. Now let's talk about the turnpike first. The turnpike is about 120, 125 miles north of the Hollywood Mall. Okay, Adam's severed head was found in a canal there. Now, that was on August 10th, 1981, the severed head was found. Okay, now, when I was going through the case files, I was looking at the phone logs, and I saw phone calls that were made. And when I saw some of these phone calls, I knew I had to contact some of these people. I spent months tracking some of these witnesses down. I mean, literally months. Going places, whole days from 8 o'clock in the morning to 6 o'clock at night, going to 5 locations at a time, in South Florida, trying to hunt these people down. Finally, I found one of the witnesses up in Central Florida. I didn't have his phone number, but I had an address. And I was almost certain, because I went to the local, like I said, the local tax appraiser's office, and I found an address with that name, and I knew this had to be him. I figured it's worth going up there. So I drove, and when I got there, sure enough, I got lucky he was home. His name is Dennis Bob, and I took that phone call with me, and I showed it to him, and I said, Dennis, there was a phone call made to the Hollywood Police Department, and I asked if this was him, and he confirmed it was him. He said he called them. And I said, after you made that phone call, did anybody call you back? Now, his phone call, first, let me tell you what they said to him when he called the Hollywood Police Department. He told me, yes, somebody called him back within the hour. But when he tried to tell them what happened, this is what the detective that he talked to said. Now, I'm going to give you a quote here. This is his quote. Okay, quote, yeah, we already know about the blue van. It has nothing to do with the Adam Walsh case, unquote. And they dismissed him. That's the only time anybody's ever talked to him. So I sat down at his dining table, and we talked for an hour. And I said, Dennis, what did you see? And Dennis told me that he worked for the Publix supermarket chain. This is one of the larger chains in the South, supermarket chains. And he drove a truck delivering from their main warehouse down to South Florida. The main warehouse is up in Lakeland, Florida, which is in Central Florida. And he would bring deliveries down to South Florida. And he was going along on the turnpike on August 7th. Now, this would be 3 days before the severed head was found. And he saw a blue van parked in the swale area. There was a man down by the canal with a white bucket taking something round out of the bucket and throwing it into the water. That's his statement. Now, you have to take a statement like that and give it a lot of credibility and a lot of credence. Not only because of what he witnessed, but he got on the CB radio. They didn't have cell phones back then. And he calls another Publix truck driver that was just minutes behind him. And he said, hey, listen, you're going to be coming up on mile marker 130. There's a blue van in the swell area. Check it out. So this guy passes. His name is Homer Ramey. And he passes, and his statement, he also made a call to the Hollywood Police Department. So his name is in the phone log there on that call, and I contacted him. He lives in Georgia. And his statement is that when he passed, he saw a white male, approximately 6 feet tall, standing by the sliding door on the passenger side of the van. The door was open, and he could see the guy because the dome light was still on inside the van, and he was fumbling with this bucket. And he was thinking maybe he had an overheated radiator. He was getting water, but the hood wasn't up, on the truck or anything. And that's what he witnessed. And he called the Hollywood Police Department, and they completely dismissed him with the same similar statement. Now, whether it was the same detective that dismissed Dennis, that we don't know. Most likely it could have been because of the chaos in the Hollywood Police Department. It could have been different people dismissing him, not realizing there were a total of 4 witnesses at that site that saw something very similar statements. They dismissed all 4 of them. Whether they dismissed them individually because there were just different detectives taking these calls, and it was not one person overseeing, the case. And that's most likely what could have happened. I don't know. I mean, only the Hollywood Police Department can answer for that, but they don't answer for anything. So you won't get any answers from them. But that's what happened. They dismissed those 4 witnesses. Now, had they not dismissed them, they could have gotten much more information out of them. One witness told me that he was willing to be hypnotized. He thinks he remembered the tag number, but doesn't remember it now. But he thinks he could have back then. But they didn't want to hear from him. They refused to listen to any of these people. Okay, now the third site where Jeffrey Dahmer worked. on March 26th, Dahmer was March 24th, he was rejected from the Army. They sent him back to the States to be discharged. His discharge only took 2 days. On the 26th, he was dismissed, and he was a civilian again. They gave him his DD-214 form, and they sent him on a plane ticket anywhere he wanted to go, and he came to South Florida. We ended at the Miami International Airport. He worked his way over to Miami Beach. And finally, around, I believe it would have been in early June, it would have been late June. He was found eaten out of a dumpster behind this strip mall. And the guy, his name is Ken Halbert, went out to take the garbage out. He saw this guy eating scraps of pizza and stuff out of the dumpster, and he felt sorry for him. He asked him if he was hungry. The guy said, yeah. He said, man, come on, I'll give you a sandwich. So he made him a sandwich. Ken said a few days later, he's taking the garbage out again. The guy's back out there, eating out of the dumpster. So he asked the guy, he says, hey, listen, man, you need a job? And he hired him as a busboy. He remembers him as Jeff. He told me about 10 days after he was hired, his new busboy comes into the sub shop at the end of the shift after he was taking the garbage out, because that was one of his duties, take the garbage out at the end of the shift now. He says to Ken in a very monotone voice, Ken, there's a dead man by your dumpster. So Ken goes out to look. Sure enough, there's a dead guy there. So he calls the police. Police show up. They want to know who found the body. He said, my busboy. He said, well, get him out here. We need to talk to him. So that's how Jeffrey Dahmer got his name all over this police report. Now, this is a 4-page report. You can go to justiceforadam.com, and you can read the entire report. I have a couple pages of it in my book, where Jeffrey Dahmer's name is all over the police report. Also, Jeffrey Dahmer is in complete contrast to what's in the police report as to what he told his boss. And it's very suspicious. Because this guy only had one shoe on. And one of the things in the police report, Jeffrey Dahmer is telling the police that the man went by the name Bobby. He was a derelict. He said he wasn't feeling well lately, and he was living in the meter room. So the police went and looked in the meter room. That's where they found the other shoe. And when I'm reading this, I knew right away. I knew that's it. That's where he took Adam. Because there was no question in my mind that it was Jeffrey Dahmer once I saw that mugshot in 1991. Remember, this is 2007 when we found the police report. And I discovered the meter room. I went back home, I got my camera, I came back, I took pictures of the meter room. Finally, ABC Primetime did a TV show about it. It was ABC Primetime that hired a CSI expert to go in there with his blue luminal lighting. And they found this blood spatter pattern on the back wall. And this crime expert, whose expertise, her name is Jan Johnson, she described this as being indicative of a high-velocity homicidal pattern, this blood spatter. And she tested it with a field kit as positive for blood and took samples, but never could get DNA out of it because of the humidity, the time, and the lime in the mortared wall. Lime is very corrosive.
Yeah.
And so there was no chance of ever getting DNA. I spent hundreds and hundreds of my own money trying to get nuclear mitochondrial DNA. That's where they take the smaller samples and they put it in a peach tree and for a month and try to multiply the cells, but nothing ever worked. We never could get DNA samples out of it. But it is positive as blood, and it is in a homicidal pattern, and it didn't belong to that man Bobby, because Bobby was listed as in his death certificate as natural causes. He had no blood on him. Otherwise, there wouldn't have been natural causes on his death certificate. And somebody died in that meeting room, yet the police refused to investigate. They refused to consider Dahmer as a suspect. And the Hollywood Police Department thinks two pit bulls were fighting in there. The Miami-Dade, because this is a Miami-Dade county, think that a bird flew into the wall. And there was a bird on the floor, but it was only 2 inches long, and the bird didn't have any blood on it either. So, this is all crap. They just don't want to investigate. They could care less about Adam. They don't care about Adam. They care about their own reputations. And there's an old saying, when you mess up, never fess up. So they prefer to feed John Walsh misinformation about his own son's abduction rather than come clean and admit how miserably they messed up back in 1981.
So now, have you had any response from the Hollywood police since your book came out?
No.
None at all.
Well, I have had some. They've been harassing me, and I shouldn't say they've been harassing me. I'm going to retract that because I can't prove it's them. Somebody's coming up with different pseudonyms on Amazon.com. You can go to Amazon.com and look at the book reviews. There's one 2-star book review. There is no question. This is deliberate sabotage on their part for me to get justice for Adam. If you read that review, and I left the review, I could have had it removed as abusive, but I left it. Instead, what I did was I responded to the comments on my book, about my book. Let me just say that the title they started off with as their review is Frustrated Witness is a Domino Theory to Nowhere. And then it goes downhill from there. They try to rebuke my book in every way, debunk what I'm saying. And it's obvious. I know who it is, but I'm not going to say because I can't prove it. But the same thing's been going on my Facebook page and other sites where I have to keep banning these people. Almost some of the stuff is worded verbatim. And let me just say this. I won't say who did it, but I'll tell you who has the most to lose. Joe Matthews, Detective Joe Matthews, who wrote that book, saying it was Addis tool. Now all of a sudden I'm saying it's not Addis tool. He convinced the Hollywood Police Department. He convinced John Walsh. He convinced everybody that it was Addis tool. The state attorney's office. They all agreed it was Addis tool, and they closed the case. Now he looks like a superhero. He doesn't want to lose his superhero status. My opinion only. I want to be careful. I already sued them. I would love for them to turn around and sue me for libel. I would love to get this in court in front of a jury and not in front of a judge with his political expedience, because I've already sued them. They tossed my case out of court. That's the reason, Al, I'm writing the book. My book is my appeal because, like I said, I sued them for those case files, as I told you earlier, and they tossed me out of court. So I appealed to the 4th District Court of Appeals in West Palm Beach, and they rubber-stamped the 17th District Court's decision. This is a case that should have been impossible to lose. There's no way you could lose this. Yet I lost? How is that even possible? There's only one way. We don't have a justice system. We only have a system. Listen, there's case files that should have been part of the record. They admit they used them. Then they say they didn't use them in court. Detective Smith says that Matthews' report was nothing more than a regurgitation of everything they already knew already. In fact, they don't even say report. In my lawsuit, they refer to him as his personal memoirs. All of a sudden, when I sue them, it's not even a report. It becomes his Matthews' personal memoirs. And they claim they didn't use them, and it's so irrelevant. How can these judges dismiss my case? Anybody that reads Frustrated Witness, Al, you read it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Any prosecutor would love to have all the witnesses I list. There's a Yankee Stadium full of witnesses implicating Jeffrey Dahmer. There's composites that match him. There's police reports with his name on it. He's only a witness because in 1981 they didn't know who he was. Had he had his reputation, he would have been elevated way beyond witness. So that's why when people ask, why do I do this? That's why. This is my appeal. And I will win this time in the court of public opinion. Anybody that reads the book, you read the book, hopefully I've won you over. And I believe I will win anybody over. Listen, this is not the first time they were sued. There's a reporter, Jay Greenland, who sued them back in 1995, filed a lawsuit because he wanted to see the case filed. This is 14 years after the case. They had no suspects. They go to court and they lie. They say they kicked Hoffman off the case. They got this new cold case detective called Mark Smith, who's very good at what he does, and they have new suspects on the horizon. But yet, they never had any suspects. That was just a smokescreen to stall for time. They don't have any suspects. They didn't then, they didn't now. The thing is, Jay Greenland did win his lawsuit against them because he was a news reporter, and he ended up getting a lot of newspapers to back him up. I mean, he even had the big guns backing him up, the Miami Herald. So he had a whole team of, top-notch lawyers on his side. I had one lawyer, and he had 4 newspapers, including all 3 newspapers here down in South Florida. The Miami Herald, the Fort Lauderdale Sun Sentinel, and the Palm Beach Post. All of them were backing him up with a half a dozen attorneys. So he won. And I lost my lawsuit in 2010. I filed that lawsuit. And also, when this new police chief, his name is Chadwick Wagner, when he took over in 2007, remember the case was closed in 2008. So he took over a year earlier. And I heard that there was a new chief on the case at the police department, so I wrote him a letter. He didn't respond. I wrote him another letter. He didn't respond. I called the police department. I talked to the secretary over and over again. I left messages. And then they wouldn't respond. So finally I went to other departments, like the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. Apparently all these other departments kept calling them. I went to City Hall, filed complaints against them, and they kept calling the Hollywood Police Department. And so finally they called me back and they gave me an interview. Now, when I went to give you an example of how I was told by one good detective when I found the crime scene in Sunny Isles, and I went to the Sunny Isles Police Department, and they tried to get me an interview with the Miami-Dade Police Department because they're a small department, I was told, and they don't have a homicide unit. So Dade County does any homicides, even accident fatalities, is handled by the county. And they told me, listen, Willis, I couldn't get you that interview, but I'm going to tell you something. This is what the detective over there told me. He said, I can tell you right now, you will never get any department in South Florida to step on the toes of another department. And he was right, because I went to City Hall, and I talked to this woman, her name is Cheryl LaHound, at the Hollywood Complaints Department at City Hall. And I sat down with her for like 40 minutes telling her about the case. And she said, Willis, you've got to come to the City Hall meeting. The mayor will be there. You've got to tell this to them. And she said, I'm going to set you up with a meeting. Tuesday, you come back. I'll call you, let you know what time. She never called me. 10 days later, I call her back. And her response was, well, if you have issues with the Hollywood Police Department, you need to resolve your issues with them. All of a sudden, her tone changed. Somebody put her in check. And this is what goes on. They don't want anybody stepping on the toes of the Hollywood Police Department. And that's when the Hollywood Police Department called me back and finally gave me that meeting. It was probably just to shut me up. Because Chief Wagner and 2 of his goons that he left me with told me in the meeting, after I'm telling them what happened about my encounter with Dahmer, they tell me, you just admitted you were there at the Hollywood Mall. You just admitted you were there. For all we know, you could have done it. How would you like it if we arrest you? Get up. We're going to put you under arrest. And then this one detective, his name is Detective Lyle Bean. This is not recorded, this interview, so they can deny this, but I'm telling you this is what happened. He backs up, folds his arm like a tough guy, and with a smirk on his face, he looks at me, eye to eye, and he says, so, you think you want to come back here again? I mean, that was a threat. They weren't really going to arrest me. I knew it, but I still take it as a threat, meaning, don't come back here again. We don't want to hear from you. We don't want to hear about your Dahmer link. We don't want the Dahmer connection. Don't come back. And they try to get me to disappear as a witness. The problem is this, Al. They're messing with the wrong witness. I was so incensed, I went and paid $650 for my own polygraph test. And it's very good that I passed with flying colors since I paid that much money for it. But I had no problems because I knew I was going to pass because I'm not lying. Everything I say is the truth. Yet these detectives, they have no qualms with going to court and lying under oath about facts in the case, and even worse than that, lying to John Walsh. In 1991, when Jay Greeland sued them, they tried to get John Walsh to side with them, and they did. They kept telling them we have new suspects on the horizon. We don't want these files released. Otherwise it's going to affect. We won't be able to find the real killer. There's information in it that only the killer knows, and they got John Walsh to side with them. John Walsh fought with on the side of the Hollywood Police Department, tooth and nail, not to get the case files released. But fortunately, that judge back then, Judge Moe, was a good judge. He sided with the newspapers and Jay Greeland and had the case files released. I wasn't that lucky.
Well, Willis, it's been very interesting. We're already at an hour.
Wow, how fast an hour can go by.
Yeah, but compelling evidence. We recommend your book. And thank you for all the effort and taking the time to do this.
Well, thank you. I'm going to continue doing it too.
Well, that's it sounds like you're driven, and go with it. It sounds like you're making headway. And
do I have another minute to close?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Okay. What I want to say is the reason I do this is because when I contacted other witnesses, like I told you about Joel, Mia's brother, he was playing with Adam, and when his mother showed up, he asked his mother if he could stay with his friend a little bit longer, and his mother said, no, his dad is here now. Mia said she saw Dahmer leaning over Adam, talking to him, and Adam looked scared but didn't say anything, and then Dahmer took him by the fingertips and walked out. So Joe's mother thought it was his dad. Remember about Philip Lurlap we talked about earlier? He thought it could have been a stepfather. Bill Bowen saw the incident where Adam was tossed like a sack of potatoes, quote unquote, into the blue van. He was thinking it was an older brother, and Adam was just misbehaving. But he took the tag number down, gave it to the police, because the way the van screeched off and left burning rubber that he said he still remembers the smell of it to this day. Now, had I witnessed this, had I not left, I would have known better. I didn't follow him to the toy department for nothing. This guy was bizarre. I knew something was going to happen, but I let my guard down. And I always felt bad about that, because I always felt I could have been the one to stop it. But then I think to myself, and I say, if it wasn't Adam, it would have been someone else. I mean, certainly, he's been trying hard to get someone, and like I said, the Twin City Mall and other locations. He wasn't giving up. But it's the least I can do for Adam. And hopefully John Walsh will come around and realize that I'm right, and these detectives, especially the one, Detective Joe Matthews, that he considers his best friend and colleague, is not his best friend and colleague. None of these detectives. John Walsh has no friends, not at the Hollywood Police Department. None of these detectives are his friend. They're only their own friends. That's it. They don't care about Adam.